Good afternoon, everyone, and a very warm welcome to the latest in our CCA webinar series, Top 5 Service Strategies to Service the Future Customer. We're delighted to do today's webinar in association with Kura. Before we start the webinar, I'm just going to run through a few housekeeping rules for you. Could you please ensure that your telephone is on mute to avoid any background noise for other participants? If you want to post a question, please use the Q&A function on the right-hand side of the screen. Today's session will be recorded and will be available afterwards should you want to use it for your teams or wider organisation. That would be great. The chat function is also available, and if you wish to post anything to either the host or our guest speaker today. There's a hashtag if you want to download the report or to tweet, and it's hashtag CS Strategies. My name is Forsyth. I'm Chief Executive at CCA, and I'm delighted to welcome you here. I'm delighted to have Kura with us also. These webinars have proved really popular, and just please remember that whilst you're listening in yourself today, it really does provide a very useful training and learning process for anybody else that you might want to involve at a later stage, and let us know if you need any other materials to support that. Okay, the agenda for us for today, I'm going to do a little bit of background and introduction, introducing you to some of the insight and research that CCA has gathered over the last year with some of our networks. I'm then going to introduce our guest speaker, who's Arceeb Moughal, who's Director of Commercial at Kura. And then we've got some time after that for question and answer. Okay, so if we turn now to some key highlights. And for those of you who haven't had a chance to look at this year's compendium, I would urge you to request a copy of it. The compendium is it's really a short read. We try and condense as many research projects, facts and figures as we can throughout the year over a whole range of topics, and it all comes together in one publication at the end of each year. It's not a difficult read, and it's also a very useful read for board meetings and for winning investment cases and whatever, lots of facts and figures. So if you haven't got one, please make sure that you request one. During the last year, we had 4 separate streams that we worked through with CCA's Thought Leadership Industry Council 2016. And I thought it might be quite useful just to review some of these to help us to think about some of the issues that we're going to hear about later with the research we did in association with Kura. So throughout 2015, a number of key principles emerged within the Industry Council scenario planning. And they led us to collapse, if you like, into 4 neat agenda items which we thought would help organisations steer towards a decent transformation of their organisation. The first one sounds pretty obvious, and it is kind of obvious, but it's quite difficult to achieve. Customer service must become core. It must become integral and therefore all parts of the brand or service offering. In other words, an enterprise-wide approach to customer service rather than leaving it to the behest of the front line. And that was something that we spent a lot of time discussing. There's a lot of really interesting outputs from it. And following on from that, a change in culture, which everyone agreed is absolutely essential so that everyone is indeed facing the customer, must be driven through the entire organisation so that every colleague sees customer service as part of their role, regardless of the seniority. And in fact, much of our discussion led to the very important agenda item about board pay being related to customer sat, which is quite a thorny issue, but something that I think everybody agreed would indeed change culture. The third one was an interesting one, innovating like a startup, the only way to move fast enough to stay ahead of the competition and to meet the evolving consumer and business needs. In other words, even if you are a large legacy organisation, which let's face it, many of our banks, financial services, utility companies are, very, very difficult to break down silos, change departments to make things like a newer, more nimble organisation. However, you can, of course, have some strategies, and many of these are detailed in the report. Bolt on a new piece, work with some new organisations to be more nimble. But this is a difficult area. It's one of the most interesting parts of the 4 sections of the year. And the final one, really nothing can really happen unless we have powerful and effective leadership. Creating an environment for people to flourish. How can you develop leadership skills to create an environment where people are fully utilising the talent in the business to transform service offering? And of course, as we go through, you'll note there's quite a lot about leadership, and one of the interesting pieces is about whether our traditional leadership styles are indeed fit for purpose in today's fast-moving, always-on digital world. These themes were translated into CC benchmarking throughout 2016, and what we did was we looked at some findings that came out across the board and some key highlights, and let's share some of these with you just now. So this one, number 4, which is the first one of our summary highlights, was customers put a high value on the convenience and simplicity of digital channels, and this emerged through just about every research piece that we looked at. 85% of organisations reported that digital channels offer simpler and more efficient options for customers. However, if you ask customers, they do indeed value it, but they do find things clunky, and therefore perhaps a clue to why there's call volumes are not reducing to the extent that organisations and indeed business planning would like. Employees holding the key to innovation. 95% of organisations reported that they're able to attract the right staff was one of the key ingredients. Now, I think we all know that, but we've certainly noticed as CC in the last year a huge rise in inquiries about the traditional things like recruitment, retention, things that by now we probably all should know enough about to have in our DNA without constantly having to revisit. But what is being thrown up just now is that the complexity of the roles that are now there, the difficulty with dealing with customers who are always on and highly engaged and have every device at their fingertips, leads to a really difficult and challenging role which we need to understand when we're both recruiting and motivating and coaching, mentoring and trying to keep people. They have to be the right people, and the culture piece is really important. So this lying behind this employees hold the key to innovation is a huge big wide topic. Okay, number 15 out of the 20 highlights was technology infrastructure in limiting innovation. And 82% of organisations reported that the current technology infrastructure is not fit to support their innovation ambitions. So there's no shortage of innovation, there's no shortage of ambition, there's no shortage of organisations specking out their digital journeys that they wish to have, but many are thwarted by the lack of technology infrastructure. So there's a really important piece there. And one of the big pieces of that was about technology at the front line. So while we as customers are all highly engaged and find things very easy and quick to do, then the clunky systems that we give our people to work with don't always marry up. So there's an important piece in there. Getting leadership right in the digital age, and as I mentioned earlier, 73% of organisations reported that a new style of leadership was required for a digital customer service world. That's quite a telling statistic when you actually consider that what people are talking about are the current leadership styles. The current leaders in their organisation are perhaps needing to evolve to meet the very big ambitions that most organisations have to get it right in this environment. Digital advantages are putting customer experience centre stage. This is a really interesting piece, which I think really what has been highlighted here is that while customer service doesn't necessarily always get a fair hearing at board level, mainly because it can be quite emotional, it can be regarded as a costly exercise. It's difficult to articulate actually some of the real customer feedback that's coming in because much of it's diverse. Whereas when you were talking about our digital agenda and the investments that are required, 97% of organisations reported there's more opportunity for customer service to influence and impact wider business decisions and discussions indeed with digital advantages. So it's a great way to focus a discussion around a whole transformation piece if you have everybody listening and if you have the right language to describe the end point, the ambition that you're trying to get to, rather than today's transaction, tomorrow's transformation. Number 20 was our future workforce predicted to be more demanding. 62% of organisations reported that millennials will be more demanding about their customer service career prospects. We've all heard a lot about portfolio working, about people wishing to be recognised for their skills rather than being simply good on the phone. We're beginning to see the emergence of multi-skilled workforces who can quite happily tweet, can happily answer phones, can happily engage in web chat, can do all of these things, and are becoming very skilled at adapting to the right language for the right channel for the right customer. And I think some of these things are becoming almost second nature to many of our young people, but many of our organisations are not set up in a way to take advantage of a younger workforce, so there's quite a lot of work needing done there. Okay, so those are just some of the highlights. There's many, many more, and as I said earlier, if you wish to have a look at the CCA compendium or indeed any of our other research reports, then you'll see the details at the end to get in touch with one of the membership services team, or indeed just email myself. I'm now delighted to welcome along today's guest speaker, who is Arceeb Moughal, who's Director of Commercial for Kura. So welcome to Arceeb.
Thanks, Anne-Marie. Thanks for that. Hello, everybody. Very interesting, insightful things you just shared there. A couple of observations for me on that. I quite like the little information you shared around about innovation. Usually, when we think of innovation, we immediately think of technology or a new platform or a new system. And it's very interesting that the statistic there, 95% of organisations think that having the right people will be critical for success of innovation. I firmly believe that innovation, from people we can have creativity, and from creativity leads innovation. So the people part of that innovation is very, very important. And you'll see in the themes of the presentation I'll do, technology is a real barrier, not only to be proactive, but also to innovate. Technology seems to be a real challenge. So very, very interesting things you've shared there. So thank you very much, everybody, for coming on. My name is Arceeb Moughal. I'm the Director of Commercial at Kura. We commissioned a piece of research earlier this year with the CCA in trying to establish the 5 key strategies to servicing the future customer. The reason that we wanted to look at that was we wanted to understand have a better understanding around the challenges of the changing dynamics of customer service today. As a business, Kura, our vision is to be recognised across all organisations as being unrivaled in developing people. So if we're going to be best at developing people, we truly need to understand what does all this change mean for people. So as Anne-Marie mentioned earlier, the world is ever more connected, much more complex, more additional channels have been added, different demographics are using these channels differently, so it's becoming a much more complex environment. This rapidly growing always-on culture where customers are always on, it's changed the dynamic and the control of conversations between organisations and customers. Previously, traditionally, the contact centre opening hours would dictate when you could contact the contact centre. The organisations would have the channel the customer would have to choose to contact, and it would be controlled in that environment. Now, with the change around social media, the customer's in control. They can choose to contact the contact centre through traditional means. If not, they can go online, they can post on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. They can target directly the organisations they want to speak to, and they expect an immediate response. And now they're doing it in the full glare of the public eye. So the always-on culture is changed the control dramatically. So how will businesses need to adapt to that? What priorities do they need to have to deal with that is something we wanted to understand. And probably, and most importantly from our perspective, what does all this change mean for people at the front line? Their job today, and Anne-Marie's already alluded to it, is already quite difficult. Lots of metrics to achieve, multiple systems to use, introduction of lots of new channels for them to use as well, and now deal with all this complexity and change as well. So those are the questions that we had in our mind around understanding, have a better level of understanding. So we carry out the research with the CCA team, and we've drawn together what we call the top 5 strategies. What I would say from the research, some of the findings were quite conflicting, which I'll share with you today. So it'll leave us some food for thought in terms of what the findings are telling us. So the top 5 strategies there, personal, empathetic, complex problem solving. So what do we mean by that? Basically, what we mean by that is, in this environment, although technology has given us lots of benefits through automation and self-serve, we're always going to need people to talk to people. That's going to be one constant that won't go away. So in the future, we will still need people. Setting up people for success is more about the skills people will need to have for the changing environment that we have and the changing in dealing with the additional challenges that we'll face. We'll need to have adaptive skills, so we need to make sure that people have the right skills in place to deal with this complex world. Measuring performance will be making sure that we're measuring things that matter most important critical measures. With the changing environment, the measures will need to change. We'll need to be proactive. We need to find ways, and I see this as we need to find ways to talk to customers. Being proactive is anticipating what the customer needs are, so we need to find ways to communicate and talk to customers rather than finding ways not to talk to customers. And the final one was leading from the top down. So the change and the leadership in this industry to drive this change is, in my view, going to come from within this industry. Nobody from the outside is going to tell us how to drive change. We need to look at this from the inside out. So just looking at the first one there, personal, empathetic, and complex problems. So what do we mean by that? So personal, as in every customer expects their experience to be personal to them. They expect to be dealt with by advisors who would show lots of empathy, and they have the skills to deal with complex problems. So we asked a whole host of questions around what the skills a future advisor would have, and you can see some of the stats there on your screen. 60% said the future advisor would have skills around handling complex transactions or interactions, and 52% said they would have high levels of emotional intelligence. What I found quite jarring was the stat to the right-hand side there. So only 11% of you said that the advisor should have decision-making skills, and that quite jarred me. Is that really what we're looking to build in the future? People dealing with complexity, having high levels of empathy and emotional intelligence, but not have the ability to make decisions? Are we creating environments where we bring advisors to work, check your brains out at the door, and then sit and put your headset on? Do we not really want them to be involved in the process, involved and connected to the customer in that journey, be part of the solution? So I found that quite jarring in terms of what we were expecting the future advisor skills to look like. At the bottom, you see a stat around, we asked some questions around the primary purpose of the contact centre. 46% of you said it was to handle transactional calls. Now, let me broaden out the point around transactional services or transactional capability, and I'll do it from an outsourcing perspective a little bit. Outsourcing is building transactional capability, and it's doing it because nearly half of respondents here are saying that's what they need, but transactional capability doesn't bring value. It's a very top-down, cost-driven approach, which is usually meant frontline people are squeezed into minimum wage jobs or zero-hour contracts. It's a long list of tasks that the outsourcer service needs to deliver. Outsourcers typically are not good at articulating the value they can add to organisations. And then we have to ask ourselves why outsourcing hasn't grown as part of the sector for the last 10 years. So we need to think broader than transactional capability and transactional services. We need to move beyond that to more relationship type services and more comprehensive services. I find that quite interesting. So just on that one, I've got one quick poll to let you guys get involved in. So just from your perspective, if you have a contact center today, or if you've got an outsourcing provider supporting you, where do you think your service lies today, transactional or not? So just let you have a quick minute to put that together, 30-odd seconds. Anne-Marie, just bringing you in there. In your view, obviously you see a lot of organisations, both sides of the equation, in terms of that capability and how it's presented itself. What's your view on that?
I think my view is that organisations mostly have an ambition to be much more than transactional, but quite often they're thwarted by lack of things being joined up, which mean that you get the daft calls, the calls that you shouldn't be getting because other things don't work. So I think there's a real ambition to move towards a much higher value conversations. But as I say, I think it's going to be quite a wee while. There's a transition going on just now, and it's quite complex. So you've also, I think, got to consider that some people, for whatever reason, depending on their situation, can't access what they need, and so they absolutely need to be, if you like, transactional at that point. And I always use just the example of a directory inquiries, and everybody will say, why is directory inquiries still existing? It shouldn't exist. It should just be an automated thing. But if you're needing a number at a particular point in time, it actually becomes the most important emotional call you can make if you're in difficulty or whatever. So there's quite I think it's a very complex thing, but I think in general most organisations are trying to sift out what's complex and trying to do simple things other ways. But there's a way to go there.
No, I think you're absolutely right. I'm just looking at the quick results that we received there. So definitely on the fence here, half of us saying that the service today is transactional, and half are saying it's not or don't know. So that probably echoes the research that we did together as well. Whereas, like you say, there's still a lot of understanding of what is transactional, what isn't, and how do we move beyond that transactional piece. So I think something for us to think about, understanding where the true value is and how do we then move towards it. So that was quite interesting, that piece of information there. So just moving on to the next one, setting up people for success. So on this section, we asked a series of questions around training, length of training, embedding of that training and learning, speed to competence of people, how long it takes, just to get an understanding of are we get the right time, the right skills for people. And you see some of the results there. 3/4 of you said that their people had the sufficient level of training. Over 40% said that the purpose of their contact centre was complex processes. We're going to tie that into, you'll see it on the right-hand side, around what they've been trained in. So you'll see on the right-hand side, a third stated that they still had skills gaps, and some of it was because of the additional channels that are coming through the systems. There were some skills gaps around that. And 1 in 5 said their advisors didn't have the ability to handle, weren't trained to handle complex processes. Now that's, that jars with the 40% that's the purpose of the contact centre. In our experience, I would say the 75% looks too high and the 33% looks too low. In our experience, people at the front line are wholly underinvested in at contact centres at the start of their career and throughout their whole career, and it's something that we've seen continuously. Training is very transactional. It's a very sheep dip approach, so everybody gets the same level of training, expect to learn at the same pace, expect you to hit the ground running immediately. If you don't hit the ground running, then you know what, there's somebody else who can replace you. This industry, sometimes we create a conveyor belt of people coming in and out of it. There's no time to embed that learning. So my kind of takeaway for this would be, let's give our people the right skills. Let's understand the skills that they need in this adapting, changing environment. So they'll have to have adaptive skills around that. We need to create environments where they can learn and embed that learning. So we need to make sure we're creating learning environments for the skills that we're going to give our people. Just moving on to the next one now. So before we move on, we've got another quick poll. This is the last poll that we'll do. It was just to get an understanding of where you think your organisation is in terms of the skills that your people have to handle complex interactions. Once again, it's very quick, just to understand if you think you've got the people have the capability to handle complexity. I think, Anne-Marie, you and I were talking about this earlier in the week regarding induction training and how that has changed and what that needs to be in the future to bring people on board at the start, never mind the right training at the start, but also continuously training people or giving them training as they go through their life cycle within contact centres.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we've had quite a lot of different forum over the last year where people have been talking about this very subject, and the definite conclusion is that the old-fashioned induction training is absolutely not fit for purpose. And you know, people now, if you're asking people to handle complex things, then quite often it's unpredictable, and so you really have to immerse them in what your organisation is, and also give them the why they're doing what they're doing, why the organisation is doing what it's doing, and what its customer service purpose is. So it probably can't be once and done. It has to be several interventions with perhaps different ways of looking at things. And going back to the millennial issue, you probably have to think about things, if you haven't already, like gamification, fun, different forms of learning, because people learn in very different ways today than they did perhaps when we started out with these traditional inductions. So lots of change, and I think there's lots of scope for people to share best practice around this area. It's something we're very keen to do.
No, absolutely. Just for an example from our side, we did a whole piece of kind of understanding and learning around how we deliver induction training for our clients, and we went away from, I think we had one program at 3 weeks training, and now we've completely changed that to a 12-week program where people are learning in the classroom, coming out, applying the learning they're having, then going back in, so in and out of the classroom to apply the learning that as they go along, rather than putting all the learning up front on the classroom and then passing them out to the floor. We've seen great results out of that, and then continuously providing live learning sessions as people go through, because you're absolutely right, the nature of service is changing, so we need to adapt how we train our people and equip them with the skills that they need. So that all has to change. Interestingly, looking at the results here, a lot of people saying, 90-odd% of people saying that they make improvements in giving people the right skills around complexity of transactions. So absolutely echoing that again in the research, that the people could do with more. Interestingly, what I would say from the research, we also had statistics around that only 5% of people said that they would have an increase in their training costs to support this. So, albeit that you can make some improvements, not a lot of people saying they need to increase their budgets, so you must have lots of already budgets for training. But I found that quite an interesting one, the first one I've seen, that people don't need more training budget. But no, thanks for participating in that. Moving on to our next one was measuring performance. And here we wanted to understand the measures the organisations have around measuring the effectiveness of the contact centre, how do we measure our people at the front line, and how do we measure the outputs for customers as well. We also wanted to understand the challenges around the key metrics. So we had a whole spectrum of results there, from the traditional measures, a lot of prevalence still on the traditional measures such as call handling and AHT and speed to answer, and some more progressive measures. You'll notice there that 63% say the biggest customer service challenge is reducing customer effort, yet only 8% of people are measuring this. So that's quite interesting. If that's one of the most critical measures, we're not out there measuring it. Our take on that is we have to look at measuring the things that matter most to us. A, to understand where we are, and B, are we getting any better at it? Now, I'll give you our perspective of this about measuring things which are very important. At Kura, we measure our culture. And you're probably thinking, well, how do you measure culture? It's a bit of an intangible, it's not a tangible measure. We've created it into a tangible measure. At Kura, we're building a culture which is focused and it's all about people, helping people as individuals, developing them and helping them understand their own strengths and weaknesses, and building their self-belief. We believe by doing this, they'll ultimately look after customers, not because they're having to do so or we're telling to do so, because they'll know it's the right thing to do. So we measure the progress we're making towards this culture. It's built on one single measure we have. Everybody in our business knows it. We all talk about it. It's very open. From our CEO all the way down to our organisation, everybody is bonused on achieving it. We call it the culture index. So it's very important for you to establish what measures matter most to you, and then have the ability and the courage to measure those things. So in the future, we need to look at those, what are the critical measures that we need to have in place, and I think we'll have to let go of some of the more traditional measures we used to have in place. So moving on to the next point. being proactive and seizing opportunities. So if we have the right measures in place, we'll be able to spot opportunities quicker, anticipate the issues of customers before they turn into challenges. We asked here a series of questions around how front-footed their service is today. 60-odd%, 62% of you said that the customer service is designed and set up in a proactive manner, with 65% saying that the customer analytic tools will be vital for servicing customer needs in the future. I think that's absolutely right. Establishing and understanding customer trends, segmenting that customer to establish their behaviours, and then predicting that will help us be proactive. I think holistically, to bring it all together, you'd also want to understand the voice of the advisor to get the process and perspective from an advisor as well, to be proactive for a customer. I think that will be very, very vital and very powerful to ensuring we have proactive service in the future. You'll see the bottom of the screen there, I think echoed earlier by Anne-Marie as well at the start. 71% of you said that poor or outdated systems is a key barrier to being proactive. So our take on this is we have to step back a little bit here and say, and have the courage to say, we need to give our people the right tools to do the job so they can help customers. We need to find the courage to put that on the table and on the agenda and develop the systems, put them in place. So the systems are doing the hard work rather than our frontline people, and the frontline people are focusing on servicing and delivering a great customer experience for customers. So we need to get the right tools in place. The next and final one, like I say, was leading from the top down. So here we wanted to know what gets buy-in the top table, what gets buy-in from the board. Nearly 80% of you said that if investment can be linked to customer satisfaction improvements, then that will get buy-in, which is, you know, a good correlation. Over half of you said that they'll get buy-in if it effectively won't cost any more money. I would say in that stat, that's lower than I would think. If you went to a board with an initiative that said it doesn't cost you any more, you want to invest in it, I think you'd get much more uptake than that. So I think here, and Anne-Marie's alluded to it in her section, from our perspective, customer service directors need to find their voice in the boardrooms. They need to have the ability to fully articulate the benefits and the return on investment, what great customer service and great customer experience delivers. We need to get out the habit of customer service departments being labelled and named as cost centres. You know, I would say we need to have terminologies like they're value centres or value creators. So I would go as far as maybe it's not even customer service directors, maybe everybody in the board collectively need to take the ownership of the customer here, so it has a collective voice, but they need to absolutely, customer service need to be the champions of this in the boardroom. So those were the top 5 strategies we came across. So what does this all mean? Well, we need to move beyond transactional capability. It needs to be much more comprehensive and much more value add. The outsourcing is an example here, building the transactional capability which you don't want and probably customers don't need. So we need to move beyond that in terms of capability. We need to make sure that our people have the right skills in the future. They have the learning environment which they can build and we can nurture those skills. We need to measure those things that matter most, having the right culture, measuring the right things. We need to make sure we're giving the right tools to our people so they are finding it easy to help customers. And we need to help our board to have the right voice, our customer service directors to have the voice in the boardroom so they can champion great customer service. So those were the top 5 that we came across. I'm just going to spend a minute or two just to give you a little brief about who we are and what we do at Kura. We are a provider, Kura is a provider of outsourced contact centre services. You think that's a little bit ironic now since I've said we're delivering transactional capability, but as a provider of end-to-end customer management solutions, we deliver end-to-end solutions for some of the leading brands around the world. Anysoft is our software business, which provides unified desktop solutions and self-serve applications to many organisations. Our unified desktop solution, which essentially is deployed over 15,000 desktops around the world today, and our self-serve application is used by almost every single college in Scotland. That's what we deliver in terms of that's what we do. What I usually say is what's more interesting is why do we do what we do? Why are we in business? I always think that's a more compelling, more interesting part. As an organisation, our primary interest is in the development of individuals. Like I said earlier, helping them understand themselves, helping them understand their strengths and weaknesses, and building their self-belief. This is where we spend our time as an organisation. We spend it very different from other organisations. We think and behave very differently from other organisations. This is where we think success lies in focusing people as individuals and building them and helping them grow. That's where we'll spend our time all the time, relentlessly, and we'll never change it. So I think, in summary, what I would say is, if in about 10 years' time, if Anne-Marie does another study and it says the industry doesn't need empathetic problem solvers, then I can say today that Kura will be screwed on that, because that's what we'll be building at the moment. Thank you very much. I think we can take some questions now.
Okay. Thanks for that, Arceeb. That was really, really interesting, some good stuff there. And it's nice to see it all in such a succinct way, because it was quite a lengthy report, and it's nice to get those highlights, which I think, although some of them are conflicting, there's reasons for it. It's always really good to have a debate about why they're conflicting, because sometimes what we want to do is not always what we end up doing. And I think a lot of what people talk about in terms of what their business is doing when they're actually asked it a different way, it's what they want to do versus what they're actually doing. So we've got a couple of questions from our audience. So let's just work through the first couple of these just now. The first one's an interesting one, which is, can you give examples of what makes a good leader in the digital world versus the traditional leader? Arceeb, do you want to give us something to that?
Yeah, I think, from our perspective, you know, a leader, I think the convention was a good, interesting point here. I think with the change in digital coming on so fast, the traditional way of thinking is absolutely different here. So it's embracing change much quicker, and understanding that you might not know it now as good as well as some of the people who have been brought up and living and breathing the technology. So I think having an open mind, being very open to change, and a facilitator, I think leading the way of traditional leaders, which was, you know, the beacon out front, and they're leading the way. I think maybe the digital leader will be actually facilitating other people to lead the way, because we might not know it, whereas as good as some of the others that are coming through this industry now know it. So that would be my take on it.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I think what most organisations probably face now is that they've got a board which is probably not very digitally enabled, and they've got a workforce which is digitally native, becoming digitally native, and it's how you bring those two together. And I suppose you have to drop your ego at the boardroom door, really, and invite in some people to really listen to what they have to say, because I think a lot of innovation will come from people who are actually dealing with customers, and not just the customer frontline, but, you know, all sorts of departments and organisations. So more democracy, maybe. Interesting word today.
Yeah, no, exactly.
In the world. I mean,
exactly.
It's interesting to look at Donald Trump, and we're saying that, you know, the traditional leader, I mean, he's probably defied all our notions of leadership, but, you know, never know, you could give the guy time, he seems to be pulling around an okay cabinet or whatever around about. And so, in fact, we've just been watching there as the webinar was being conducted. Time magazine has just announced that Donald Trump is the Man of the Year, or Person of the Year. There you go. So,
what I would say about Donald Trump there is that he did embrace social media. If you think about what he's doing on Twitter, you know, that's been very, very influential. And I think the point you make about boardrooms, that the digital natives are more engaged than some of the people in the boardroom, I think that's absolutely right. I think there's still a skepticism of, will social media actually make a big difference? And you've got somebody like Donald Trump who's got millions of followers now, and he's swaying public opinion on it. So I think you're right. I think there's a understanding gulf between some of the boardrooms and actually what's happening out there in the world of digital today.
Yeah. And of course, there's no hiding place because things get into the board. So I think another change in leadership also of today and before is that there used to be a lot of time to navel gaze and make decisions and then announce it, allow it to cascade down and filter and get feedback. No, we don't have that time now. It's all real time. People are making decisions, and that's a huge challenge. Having to make decisions and having to think about sound bites, which are really important, whether you're doing broadcast to your whole organisation or whether you're doing it publicly. So I'm not sure it's a great thing, but I think some of the skills that are needed by boards and leaders in general to make decisions are skills that don't naturally reside within any particular age group. And I think that there's lots of ways that we just have to be creative about how we bring people together to make sure that we can access the best skills and the best leadership.
Yeah, no, I agree.
So the next question really is, when we refer to induction training, were we referring to technical skills and soft skills or technical only? So what do you think to that one, Arceeb?
I think that from a training perspective, yes, it's technical training. I think, if you're using multiple systems or multi-channel, yes, it's all about the product training that you need to have, the technical skills you need to have. But if you think what technology is doing, it is eliminating simplicity from the volume of calls or volume of interactions. So it's leaving complexity, which I think will have a need for a much more higher level of soft skills training, how to deal with vulnerable customers, how to deal with complexity, how to deal with emotional empathy, how to portray empathy or deal with decision making. So I think the soft skills will be much more prevalent in understanding how to deal with those situations. An example I give today is you might have 10 calls, and 4 out of those 10 calls are complex in nature and high sensitivities or emotionally charged, and the 6 are quite process-driven and quite transactional. Over time, those are the ones that will be driven out through automation, which will leave the 10 out of 10 calls or 8 out of 10 calls to be more complex. So we'll need to have people much more resilient, and these are soft skills that people need to have: resilient decision-making, understanding people from their perspective, dealing with vulnerable situations within people. So I think product and technical will have its place, but the soft skills will be where we'll have to put the real focus in, and how we allow people to apply that knowledge and understanding. It's not as if you're reading a textbook and you get it. You'll have to apply that learning over time. So that's where I think the in-classroom, applying it and coming back in and out of classrooms will help you build that kind of understanding of how to deal with that. It will come through time and experience.
Another question, slightly different really, is are there any trends that you're noticing in the contact centre? What's the next big thing that we should be aware of? In other words, there's something coming at us that we're perhaps not really talking about enough. What's your answer to that one, Arceeb?
Well, I think, I don't know if we're not talking about it. We know automation is around the corner. Well, so they're telling us that, Mark Carney, Governor of Bank of England, said, 15 million jobs will go. I think the convention is in 30 years' time, there'll be nobody left in contact centres. So there is this, it feels that there's a bow wave of automation coming to the point where a lot of change would be driven. If you read the article that Mark Carney put together, was the technology revolution is about to come now. So that will bleed its way through into contact centres. We've built an industry which is service-based, so they will impact our industry. I think that is how we deal with that and how we anticipate to deal with that. I still think no matter how much innovation we'll have, we will still need people to talk to people. And the more innovation and more technology we have, the complex it will become for people to deal with. Because when they fall out of that technology process or that automation, it'll be quite a difficult situation to deal with. So I think the next big, I don't know if it's the next big thing, I think it is just the big thing on the horizon, and organisations are weighing up how to deal with that, and how soon will it be. I mean, if you read some articles, it's going to be tomorrow, but I've been reading about what AI and robotics for the last 5 years, that it's about to take over all the key industries. So that's one thing I would say is the trend and conversation is moving towards doing more with less, and one way to do that is bringing automation into contact centres and having, the chatbots and etc. delivering services. So that's one thing I would say. I'm not sure if you've got a perspective on that.
Yeah, no, I mean, I agree. I think there's a huge question mark over the whole automation piece. Most companies I speak to just now see automation as taking the drudge and the heavy load out of what's, making life easier, if you like, for people at the front line. I think there's a huge pent-up demand in our public to have explanation and also a lot of emotion and a lot of, you also look to the demographics where we're going to be a much older population in about 5 years' time, myself included in there. And I don't know whether that makes us, I think it probably does mean we will need more service and we might need more personalised service. So I think that the next big thing really is segmentation. I see that as a huge piece. And I agree with you totally. I think we're always good. I don't think humans are going to go out of fashion. I think I think we're going to be. I think we just don't understand yet the way that the shift will happen and how it will work out what we're needed for and what we're not. There's more of a comment here, I suppose, than a question, but I'll read it. It's from Bernard over in Ireland. Our staff have the answers to improving the way, whether internal or external interactions, gathering and empowering their voice will reap benefits both in delivering excellent customer service and identifying cost savings. Trust them. Good point there. What do you think?
I think absolutely right. Most of the answers lie with our people at the front line. We need to give them a voice. We need to bring it together, and we need to display it. I think it's absolutely right. Continuous improvement will come from the people at the front line, in my view, and how you harness that is the challenge.
Just maybe one more question, which is going back to, really, I suppose all of this depends on leadership and winning business cases. So what advice would you offer to help build a case for customer service funding in the boardroom?
I think to build a business case, I think what's important is to understand, there's two levels to this. The first thing is to understand what is the primary thing you're trying to achieve. Is it about value? Is it about cost? Is it about both things? I would say always start from the outcome perspective, start from your customer to say what outcome are you trying to achieve, and that starts to build a case for your business case. If you want to improve something, what is it you want to do? And then you can then establish the value of that improvement. From a business case perspective, there's lots of ways to do this in terms of how to tangibly put together business cases. In some businesses find it easier than others, make it quite arbitrary sometimes, total cost of your service versus the number of transactions you have. You get a cost per transaction, and that helps you build a financial case for your business case. But the more piece for me would be what difference will it make? What improvement will you have as a result of that? And have it from an outcome perspective. So will it improve the NPS for your customers? Will it improve satisfaction, loyalty for your customers? Your customer lifetime value will improve, and use that as your kind of guiding principles of, if it can help to improve those areas, and I can identify it and tangibly put a value to it, then that brings weight to the business case, and then that should be seen as the kind of position of why you should invest in customer service. I think customers, by and large, want to talk to their organisations when they have an issue, or sometimes not. When you have a great experience, you're more likely to speak to your customer service team again. So it's how you harness what that value means is probably the challenge. But I would do it on two fronts. I would look at it from an outcome perspective, but I also look at it from a numbers perspective as well.
Okay, thanks for that. I think that's probably all we've got time for. We're just running up to the end of the webinar. It's been fascinating. I think we've uncovered quite a lot of interesting service strategies. The debate will go on. Huge thank you to Kura for both partnering in this research and also for providing the webinar. I know that many of you will have questions, you want to carry on the discussion, so if you want to get the report in the first instance, then you've got your URLs coming up at the end of this, just to access the report directly. You can also, if you think of anything afterwards that you want to ask, then please just do that through either the URL to email to ourselves, and we'll share that. If there's anything else you need by way of resources, then please just get in touch. So thank you very much to everybody, and we'll speak again soon. Thank you.
Thank you very much, everybody.